All right, so nobody is online yet, but that doesn't matter. I just need to go somewhere. Right, so ladies and gentlemen, while I'm waiting up until it is 4 o'clock, let me say a happy Father's Day to all of the human beings who are fulfilling a father's role. So there is some people who are single mothers, but they're also fulfilling a father's role. So happy Father's Day to you. And then a happy Father's Day to all of those present fathers in the lives of their children. Now I know a lot of fathers in many cases doesn't feel appreciated on this day because some of the gifts are lousy, and sometimes they even have to pay for those gifts. But please enjoy it. It means a lot when a significant other or a child is giving you something, a gift. Always cherish it. And I know a lot of present fathers, they do cherish it. It means the world to them. And I hope you guys had some lovely food today, especially those who are living in South Africa, because it's quite a sunny day today. So hopefully you enjoyed it. But let me not keep you much longer and get into today's topic. So this is what I call the Sunday show, and the Sunday show is revisiting some of the top stories of the week, and I get some of my colleagues and people to join the conversation with me. And this week we are looking at 3 topics, and those topics are the Greta Thunberg mission to Gaza. There's some interesting takes in the media about it, so we will go over some of the stories in the media, and then we'll get Danielle to talk to us about her views on the Greta Thunberg mission. But there's also the issue that Israel recently attacked Iran, and what we currently going to see is a full-blown war, or possibly a full-blown war between Israel and Iran. And then in locally in news that is somewhat connected is Liam Jacobs' move to the Patriotic Alliance. I will show you at the end how all of those stories are connected. But let's get into the first story that made headlines this week, and I want to take you to this particular slide, the browser, and what you guys will see is a lot of the coverage when it comes to the Greta Thunberg mission to Gaza. And it's reported by many organizations, as you would see. For example, if we look at how the different media outlets have reported on it, then we'll see the CNN specifically are saying is that Greta Thunberg departs Israel on a flight to Gaza after the detention aboard an Egypt. But if we look at how MSN reported, it says that Greta Thunberg, we have been kidnapped. And if we look at Sky News, it was reported as Greta Thunberg accuses Israel of an illegal act after deportation to France following the seizure of the Gaza aid boat. And the BBC, Gaza activists aid boat with Greta Thunberg on board docks in Israel. So a lot of these coverage of the story doesn't shows the horrific nature of what potentially could have went wrong. But it also shows us the way the media is covering many of these stories. So I asked Danielle. Danielle is a good friend of mine, and an activist in this space, and I asked her commentary on it, and I gave her 4 questions. And one of the first questions I wanted to help me reflect on is, could we consider the humanitarian mission of Greta a success? And this is what Danielle had to say.
So I think it would largely depend on how we're defining success. If we mean breaking Israel's blockade on Gaza or getting aid into Gaza, then no, that didn't happen. But if we're talking about creating or amplifying visibility and getting the world to refocus its attention on what is happening in Palestine to Palestinians, I suppose in that sense it worked. And I think a huge part of why it worked was because of Greta's involvement and her presence on the boat. Greta Thunberg is this young, white, internationally recognizable figure that is mostly celebrated. And she fits a very media-friendly narrative in that way. And this is not to discredit her at all. On the contrary, she put her body in harm's way to stand in solidarity with Palestinians, and that's something that I respect and admire. I think that what she did is exactly what it looks like to use your privilege effectively, particularly as a white person. She knew that her presence on that boat would draw international attention, and so she chose to use that. And I think that's quite powerful. Not everyone has the freedom or the safety to confront oppression head on like that. That said, I don't want to skip over something that is a bit uncomfortable, and that is that the mission really only made the big headlines it did, I believe, because Greta was on board, because she is white, because she is recognizable, because she has a history of celebrated activist pursuits, and she fits that narrative. I think that the media and the public broadly can comfortably engage with. And it's a hard truth to sit with, but it's unsurprising. I think the truth is that whiteness still holds a lot of moral authority and moral capital, and so white people, they have the power to sort of shift public focus and shift narratives as well. It doesn't make Greta a villain in that way, far from it. I think it just reveals the system that she's operating within, which is a system that we all operate within. A system that dictates who is visible and who is not, whose lives matter and whose lives don't. Okay, question 2. I think it's quite a stark difference in the...
So you didn't hear that part, so I'm going to repeat it because I just saw that my mic was muted. So what I was saying is that one of the things that Danielle pointed towards was that there is a difference when it comes to the coverage. And one of the questions I ask her is, what is the underlying politics of this difference in media coverage? And this is what Danielle had to say.
Okay, question 2. I think it's quite a stark difference in the coverage of the flotilla, the Madeleine, versus the land convoy, and I think it tells us quite a lot. The land convoy, particularly from North Africa, made up mostly of black and brown activists, barely made a dent in the news cycle in comparison to the Madeleine, which was carrying Greta, and that made headlines across the world, and everyone was engaged, particularly online. And it's not just about the difference in sizes of the mission, the land convoys versus those activists who are on the boat, or even the nature of the action, but it's about who I think the media finds compelling and credible and safe enough to platform. And it also, I think, especially tells us that visibility is shaped by race, continues to be shaped by race, and one's proximity to whiteness, and again, the ability to fit a particular narrative that doesn't disrupt too much. I think it also tells us that media doesn't just report on stories, but actively shapes and constructs them. And in this case, the story that made headlines and that gripped the world's attention was one with the young white woman front and center. And again, that's not Greta's fault, but it's just a mirror held up. And it's a reflection in that mirror of whose resistance is seen as noble and as legitimate, and whose is dismissed and even criminalized. And it's also, I think, about how Western geopolitical interests shape the framing itself. The idea that neutrality is possible, that both sides are equally powerful, or both sides have equal claim. So yeah, I think this difference in coverage shows us why it's so important to center the voices of those directly affected. Palestinians and those who stood in solidarity with them, particularly from the global south, have been speaking up for decades. And it shouldn't be the case that when people like Greta join in, that the world stops and takes a pause and listens. That balance is racialized in a very obvious way, and it's unjust.
So one of the things that Danielle pointed out in a response is that there's a racial undertone when it comes to this particular politics. And one of the striking things that came from all right, I'm back on. So sorry for that. When it comes to the mic, it comes and goes at some point. So one of the things, if I have to repeat myself, is that Danielle talks about the racialization, and one of the people who stayed behind in Israel was Rima Hassan, and she is a European Parliament member, and we can consider as a black or brown woman. And the interesting part is that she was treated like a prisoner, and she was held at the given prison in Remla. So I asked Danielle what she made out of that, also being a woman, and this is what Danielle had to say.
Okay, question 3. I think Rima Hassan, she has been deported. She was deported on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, so both her and Greta should be home by now. But yeah, while she was kept behind and criminalized by the Israeli regime, yeah, the difference in treatment that Rima Hassan experienced versus Greta, it's pretty stark, and I also think, again, pretty telling. And this is not to pit one against the other. Both Rima as well as Greta stood 10 toes down for what they believed in, but the consequences for them were not the same. And I think that's the point, is that this system, this white supremacist system, particularly, does not treat all bodies equally. Rima's resistance, her refusal to be deported, was seen as threatening, was criminal even, particularly because she doesn't have the same protection and privileges that Greta does. So Rima is brown, she's part Palestinian, and she just does not fit into this ideal or model in the Western mind of what a peaceful protester look like. And I think, if we're also honest, Rima doesn't quite benefit from the kind of political innocence that white women particularly experience and have, that's granted to them. And I think that particular innocence is quite powerful in the way that it humanizes white women, in the way that it softens the response when white women step out of line, or invites public empathy. Rima's presence, quite to the contrary, was read as threatening and, again, criminal, and one can't help but notice the racialized tones in that difference between Greta and Rima. So yeah, the contrast in how these two women were treated, I think, exposes how systems of power respond to resistance, and it also, I think, shows us what solidarity can cost when you're not shielded by whiteness or institutional status. And it's a very uncomfortable sort of realization or truth to have to sit with. It shouldn't be that the more marginalized you are, the higher the price you pay for resisting oppression. But that's exactly what the reality is, unfortunately. And I think Rima's treatment that she experienced, it wasn't an exception. It wasn't, sorry, my cat, but it reveals, again, a pattern.
So the takeaway there is that that Rima's treatment is a black or brown woman, whoever we want to. All right, my audio is back. So the takeaway there is what is a striking, and another striking part for me is that Danielle say it's not an exception, and that is supposed to be an extremely sad part, because if we can take it, bring it to South Africa, that's also the case. There's so many young people who are not white, who are criminalized from a very early age. So we see this right through various types of systems, that this is not the exception. So the moment you are not white, the likelihood that you would be criminalized in a system is so much greater. But I switched the gear because people were talking about the Israeli genocide, and the one thing that I've noticed is that there is a great level of participation by the West in this particular genocide that we're currently seeing in Gaza. So one of the questions I asked Danielle is, should we broaden the responsible parties of this genocide? Should we include Western countries with Israel? And that includes the UK, France, Germany, and the United States. And
Okay, last question. So I think, yeah, absolutely, we should definitely do so. I think Israel may be the one carrying out the attacks, but it does so with the full backing of several Western countries. So yes, I think the responsibility should extend beyond Israel's borders. Western countries aren't simple bystanders here. They're the ones supplying the weapons. They're the ones shielding Israel from international accountability. And also, particularly, what I find quite dangerous is that they're helping shape the narrative in ways that makes resistance look like terrorism and genocide look like self-defense. And that complicity, I think, should definitely come with consequences. It's quite frightening as well when these same countries, particularly the United States, who harp on so much about democracy and human rights and respect for international law, then turn around and fund mass violence. It's their language of concern, I think really it rings hollow when they turn around and do something that is completely contrary to what they're claiming. I think it might also be a good idea for one to perhaps interrogate or broaden, or both interrogate and broaden the definition of responsibility, or what it is that we mean by responsibility. So it's not just about governments and world leaders, it's also institutions and corporations and arms manufacturers and the media, and even us as the public, as citizens, who are all involved and all propping up the system of imbalance of power. So yeah, I think everyone, it's not equal responsibility, but I think everyone has a responsibility. Not everyone, particularly coming from a civilian perspective, not all of us can march or protest and affect change in that way, but we're all somewhere within the system. And so whether it looks like awareness raising, or being more mindful of how we spend our money, or being more careful or more intentional about who we platform and who we allow on our feeds. I think we have more power than we think, and I think that we should look at ways that we can affect that change. So yeah, if we want real justice, I think the conversation has to extend just beyond governments and their leaders. It has to be bigger than just looking at one country. It has to be about this global network of power that allows violence to continue, and not just in Palestine, but also here on the African continent and in the rest of the world.
So one of the striking things that Danielle said for me was that these powerful people in the West, make resistance seems like terrorism, and terrorism like self-defense. So there's this constant narrative that's been put out there that Israel has the right to defend itself. Israel have the right to defend itself. But then something happened, like what happened a day ago, 2 days ago, almost 2 days ago, where Israel attacked a sovereign country and said they did it because they didn't want Iran to develop any nuclear capabilities because they see it as a threat. Now, this particular nuclear strike was, or not nuclear strike, this particular attack on the nuclear sites of Iran was done with the help of the West. Now, I can already see, and I want to go through some of the news so that you can have this view with me, is that once again this is positioned as Israel has can do this, and when the victim, which is Iran in this particular case, retaliates, then Iran is painted as the aggressor in this particular case, and Iran wasn't the aggressor in this case. So if we look at some of the reports, then we'd see the following. Iran defends retaliatory strikes on Israel. What we know about the attacks on Iran's nuclear site: Israel attacks Iran. So what we see is that there is a difference in the report. So Al Jazeera, a Qatari-based news network, reports it differently than media in the West. So if we look, for example, the media in the West it's more sympathetic towards Israel. And if we start looking at Israel versus Iran, then you would see it becomes even more sympathetic towards Israel. For example, this one says here, Israel's missiles call for multiple casualties in Israel as Israel strikes Tehran oil depot. So there is more sympathy in the West towards Israel, even though Israel is the aggressor in this particular instance, than there is towards the innocent people that were killed over months now in Israel, in Iran, because of Israel. Now, a friend of mine is on the line. His name is Tendo, and I would like to have his view on it. So hopefully, if I call him now, then he would be able to answer and give his take. So let's see if I can get. Let me see if I can get Tendo on the line. Yo, Tendo.
Hi, Jacob. How are you?
I'm good, man. So you are now live, and you're joining the conversation. So one of the things that I would like you to tell me is, how do you see this attack that is currently happening, or this potential conflict between Israel and Iran? What's your take on it?
Thank you, Jacob, and calling me unannounced. I think it's quite interesting politically, that is, because you are having. It seems to me that we're going to have a group of people that were pro Palestine now being pro Iran, because the nature of politics in the Middle East now is such that people, or most people in the global South, are totally against Iran. Are totally against Israel. So we are forced in corners to beg people that politically otherwise wouldn't have been begging, simply because of the atrocities and aggression that has been happening, that Israel have been doing across the region. For me, it's quite interesting that you find that people say that we want regime change. What it simply tells me is that people want the leadership that they want to dictate upon people. So-called democracy is democracy based on the leaders that they want. If the Iranian people want this leadership, that's what they must get. And I think that we are gonna, literally, we are already in a war now, and I think it's not about to end now. And that, unfortunately now, it's not another Palestine now. It's a much more bigger boy to fight against. And I think that we're going to have a lot of casualties in Israel. We're going to have a lot of damage because the military power of Iran is quite greater than any other opponent that Israel has faced directly. So it's very interesting anyway. It's good to observe and have opinions on these things, but as you know, politics is never certain.
All right. The one question I have for you is, what do you think is the potential impacts that it have on South Africa, especially you a business person, and you know that some of the things that affects people also in the Middle East region also affect people in BRICS and in South Africa. So, is there anything that you might see in a way that it affects us and draw us into this conflict?
So, conflict or war only benefits the contractors, the military contractors, the militia, the contractors that they hired gun, there's some equipment suppliers and so on and so forth. But any normal business people is bad for them. But is that our economy is always very volatile about international issues. But I don't think we are big trading partners with either Israel or Iran for that matter. So I don't expect it to have that much impact. But of course, the currency fluctuation and all these things is often very much subjective. I don't think we will be that greatly affected or affected at all. Yeah, that's my take on that.
Yeah, but you know that soon Donald Trump will call President Ramaphosa and ask whose side are you on this particular conflict, and you've seen the lies that Elon Musk already told how that affected us.
The only thing that Donald Trump really cares what Ramaphosa thinks. No, it's not that kind of politics anymore. It's not the kind of politics in the Mbeki era when he said that American presidents will call him and ask him, "We're going to attack. What do you think we must do?" We are not there. The president in the White House is a different guy. He's focused mostly on national affairs, and which is what we all should do. So international affairs and involvement in that scale should not be something that we are really greatly affected with. It's because we need to focus on building our own economy and doing our own thing and being competitive in the international market and international space. Like I said before, right? Iran is quite big, and reports that I've been listening to the whole day is that Donald Trump doesn't want to be involved in the war. It's because it's a totally different opponent. It's totally different beast. You don't want to be involved in a space where those guys have such ballistic missiles that can intercontinental and so on and so forth. It's just not worth it. It's not worth it anymore. And the opinion on this Israel issue is greatly changing amongst the millennials, amongst the young people in this world. We are listening, we are paying attention, and luckily with social media, we see different opinions. We see the videos on the ground. We actually can see and it actually affects ourselves. We don't wait for SABC or another news outlet to tell us what to think. So I don't think Trump cares what Ramaphosa thinks. We don't have a friend in the White House. It's quite clear, and with the tariffs, it's also quite clear with what happened, recently in that side. So I don't think we need to worry about that. I think
my mic kicked out again, but Tendo, thank you for so much for it. I agree with you. We have to grow our own economies, and it's a good thing that we are not directly involved in this particular conflict. So I think President Ramaphosa must take the opportunity and see how can we grow our economy, but how can Africa as a region become the next dominant superpower? Thank you, man. Enjoy your Sunday.
I have a question for you.
Okay,
given that you are pro, I know you are pro Palestine. What's your opinion, or what's your take on the war now? What's your take on Israel? One, attacking almost everybody in the excuse of eliminating this or that. What's your take on Netanyahu's take that, in his speech, he's always saying that we are protecting everybody, we are protecting you, Americans, this we want to kill you, and whatever it is. What do you think is the objective there, and what do you think is the angle? And do you think that Israel stands a chance of winning this war, or taking over the Iranian regime, or taking it down?
So the way I see this, and this is my take on this particular conflict, Israel, it's not Israel that is behind any of the things that we see happening in the Middle East. It's actually the West. It's Western countries with Western interest groups that is controlling the politics in the Middle East. So I see Israel as the colonial outpost for the West in that specific region, because they want to control that specific region geopolitically, and that will literally have them the control over all of the oil production. And people might say, Jacob, this take might be outdated because there's electrical vehicles and all of these things coming.
I don't think your take is outdated, is because it's coal power plants that powers electric vehicle at the end of the day.
Yeah. But yeah, and the West is literally being run still by oil, and they need to they have to control it, and Israel is their colonial outpost. So yeah, but you can hear me, but the people online can't hear me. So right. So ladies and gentlemen, me and Tendo had that conversation. So there's just one, but that is the last. But then I hope you guys got it. And his response was that my take is not outdated. It's the world is still being run in oil. So for me, Israel is just doing what the West wanted to do, and Iran is literally standing in their way, and BRICS is pressing them. But I want us to move on to the next topic, and it's the last one, and this is quite an interesting one, and that one is of Liam Jacobs. So those of you who do not know Liam Jacobs is a young and upcoming politician who are making a name for himself by taking selfies or videos exposing some of the corruption, and he was part of the DA. I think last week or the week before, he was grilling in Deni Jordan for some of the things that happened in Safa. Now, Liam left the DA and joined the Patriotic Alliance, I think at midnight. It's midnight Saturday, midnight Friday, early Saturday morning. He became a member of the Patriotic Alliance, and it was received with a lot of praise from various different groups, and we can see there's is a number of South African media reports that that have reported on this matter. Now, since he is such a charismatic figure, there is a hope I see in some circles is that is going to boost the public profile of the Patriotic Alliance, but also helps with the upcoming local government elections. I know specifically there is a by-election in Ward 7 in Machikama municipality, and it's going to be a highly contested election. So hopefully he will pop out there and help the members, the patriotic members in that particular ward. But that's not how I know Liam Jacobs. Liam Jacobs was one of the people who recently went to Israel and came back and said that there was no apartheid could be found in Israel. So I just want people to know this also, that even though this is a young, charismatic leader, that he still protects quite a lot of Zionism. I don't know if this was his stance or this was the stance of the party, but he was one of the people that was mentioned in it. So, and I want you to read this particular part. You will see they were joined by fellow DA MPs Catherine Christie, Bridget Masanga, Nicholas Mayberg, Liam Jacobs, and Mbongen Khosi Madikizela. And at that specific trip, there was also patriotic members, MPs, Ashley Souls and Millicent Motapa. So what I want to point out is that there is a danger with this charismatic type of young leaders who disregard a lot of what the world and everyone else is saying. So the World Court have already found that Israel is guilty of apartheid. Now, apartheid is a crime against humanity. So it's been a crime against humanity since the 1960s. Now, as a South African young person and as a South African, you're supposed to know of this history and this type of apartheid. You also are supposed to know about the courts and what happened. So yeah, I just wanted to prove is that the World Court found Israel responsible for apartheid. Israel's occupation of Palestinian territory is apartheid, and that comes from the United Nations. So there is a consensus that what is happening in Israel, in the Palestinian occupied territories, those areas which under Israeli control, that is apartheid. So that is almost like taking us back to the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, where there was different types of segregations for different types of people, for different types of laws. He's young, so maybe he doesn't know the extent of apartheid. He doesn't know how it looks like. But if he doesn't know, there is elders in his family, there is elders all around him, is one of the things that he really have to think about. If the world, if the courts, if the UN, all of them are saying that there is apartheid in Israel and in the Palestinian occupied territories, then we have to believe it. We cannot selectively believe some of the things. So I just wanted to make that clear. So even though that this person is young and upcoming politician, very charismatic, there is a history with him specifically. And this is what I want to show you, is that all of these stories, all of these three stories that was in the media is connected, because all of them are connected to Israel. So what we're currently seeing is that Israel is the last colonial outpost for the West, and they are implementing a type of colonialism that ensures the dominance of the West, not just in the Middle East, but over critical resources that the world is needing. So even though this is happening in Israel, it also affects us in South Africa. So when you are going to vote, think about these types of politics that is happening somewhere else in the world, but have consequences for us in South Africa. South Africa experienced apartheid, so we have to understand apartheid. So when people make statements like there is no apartheid, when World Court and the UN have found it otherwise, then we cannot trust those type of people, unfortunately. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me with this particular live. It's the Sunday show, and it's going to be on every Sunday from 4 up until 5. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in another episode of Raw and Uncut, either Abrasive Conversations or now the newly edited show on Abrasive Media, which is called The Sunday Show. Thank you for watching. May God bless, and all of the fathers, happy Father's Day. Eat some meat. And if you're vegan, eat some meat. I'm just joking. Eat a carrot or something. Bye-bye.